My name is Sari van Poelje. I'm the CEO of Intact Academy. We give training programs for coaches and consultants all over the world, from beginning coach to team coach to organizational consultant. And my other business is Team Agility, in which I help businesses innovate their business more quickly than their products. What we're doing here is a video about the tools we use during our work, and one of the tools is transactional analysis. The last video, we talked about rackets and racketeering, how people confuse authentic feelings with racket feelings, and how that might distort their reality. Today, we're going to talk about discounting, which is another way in which we tend to distort reality and keep the story we used to have going. So discounting in actual fact is you're faced with a problem and you kind of ignore any information that could help you solve the problem. So you're having an argument with your boyfriend and you're saying, oh, you should be the one to do the dishes. And you have this argument over and over again, and then suddenly you realize, well, actually, we could be buying a dishwasher. But somehow that's lost in the heat of the conversation because everything was about getting someone else to do something for you. I guess you know that kind of conversation. Well, discounting can be, that's a light version, but discounting can be quite serious in that people in the heat of the moment, in the heat of stress, forget to take into account all the facets of problem solving and the information that is at hand. The way you can recognize that people are discounting is what we call through grandiosity or through passive behavior. This was discovered by someone called Jackie Schiff, and she wrote books about this. It's called cathexis theory and cathexis therapy later. And her idea was that when people are stuck in their story, they kind of, on the outside, when they don't want to change their story, they show passive, what she called passive behavior. And interestingly enough, the behavior you see, passive behavior is a weird container name for it. But she said, sometimes you see people being faced with a problem and they do nothing. It's like they're frozen. And so a train is coming and you stay on the tracks and just watch the train coming, basically. For instance, you're getting older, all of us do if we're very lucky, and you don't have any savings for your pension. You complain about it very often, that the state isn't doing anything or your employer isn't doing anything, but somehow you never get around to opening a savings account. That's a way of discounting, of doing nothing and actually keeping the problem going. And so also, interestingly enough, your racket, because you can complain about it continuously. The other way that people show that they're discounting inside, so not taking into account all the information, is that you see people overadapt. So again, you're faced with this problem of pensions, and someone says, well, you should do this. And you go, yes, you should do that. Yes. But actually, you're discounting your own capacity to think about it. And in that over-adapting, at some point, you'll go, I blame you for the decisions I took. And that's a way also of discounting your own capabilities of solving a problem, and probably exaggerating someone else's capability of solving your problems. And so also keeping your old story going. The other way you can see that people are discounting information, so really not taking into account all the possible solutions that are in the context, is because they start agitating. So I don't know, you're discussing, again, I don't know, for some reason pensions are on my mind, but you're discussing this pension problem at the dinner table. And the other person across from you gets really upset about this. Oh my God, we don't have a pension. And instead of staying in the conversation, in the dialogue to solve the problem, they start getting up and fiddling with the washing up, or, I've got to take a walk now. And they start agitating really Or they pick a fight with you saying, oh, you should have saved before. Why didn't you save before? And before you know it, you're talking about, you know, how dumb you were not to do savings before, instead of actually solving the problems of starting an account to save for your pensions. We call that agitation. So when you start really showing habitual behavior that allow you to avoid problems. All of us do it, and all of us have specific ways of doing it. And it might be interesting for you to figure out, you know, what do I do to agitate? And agitation can come in many forms. So sometimes people do it, like I said, you know, it's very visible that they start agitating. Other people do it in a very, you know, acceptable way, like they're having a problem in their relationship and they go, oh, I have to finish my work, and they start working on the computer. That's in some senses also a form of agitation. Anyway, the fourth way people discount and don't solve their problems is we call it through violence or incapacitation. Now that comes in many forms. So when we say violence, you know, you think it's a very extreme form. But as I said, you know, starting a fight with someone, picking on them, really, that's also a form, if you want, of violence. Incapacitation is, for instance, you're faced with a problem and you get sick. And every time you're faced with the same problem, you get sick again. So really what we're saying is what people do sometimes when they're faced with a problem is they discount. So they don't take into account all the possibilities they have in their context to solve the problem. And the way you can see it is through the 4 passive behaviors. One of the other ways that you can see the problem, people are not solving their problems or not really taking into account all this information and using what we say their adult ego state, is through grandiosity. So the moment you hear people say, I don't know, you bring a problem to the table, like anything, pensions again, let's say, and someone says, oh, you always have to bring this up when we're eating. You never take into account that I don't have a space to talk about this. The minute you hear people say always or never, it's usually, you know, an overgeneralization. Or if you hear people say, I always am the one who has to solve the problems around here, you know, it's a form of discounting, because they're over exaggerating their own capacity and denying you, discounting your capacities to solve the problem. So those are also very clear signals that people are discounting inside. The moment people start to discount inside is really the moment you have to be very, very careful that you don't enter into rackets and games. Because any racket in a relationship, in a working situation, starts with a discount. And we'll talk more about that later.